the new album from William Klein Bailey.
Join me, Samantha, for the variety show, Friday afternoons on Feferity Radio, your nostalgic station.
Hi, my name is Gordy. Join me for the best in jazz, soul, and more. Saturdays, 11 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Feferity Radio London, your nostalgic radio station.
Hey, this is Juwon Ogungbe presenting Jive Talking with Juwon on Feferity Radio
on the last Saturday of every month from 2 till 4 p.m.
and on Thursdays between 6 and 8 p.m. Jive Talking with Juwon is going to feature music from all over the African continent, an eclectic range of sounds, and also an eclectic range of special guests who will come from different walks of life, artists, poets and all sorts of people. Anyway, I look forward to engaging with you on Feferity Radio, your nostalgic station.
Feferity Radio, your nostalgic station.
Welcome and good afternoon. You're joining myself, Samantha Radford, here on the Variety Show. It is Friday afternoon and I will have the pleasure of your company for the next 2 hours, along with a varied playlist of some tunes that all relate to the topic that we're looking at today. And today our focus is, yes, you guessed correctly, once again, we're going to be looking at relationships, an area that interests me a lot, just partly because I have a counseling background, partly because I have a great love and interest in people in general. So trying to understand how us relating to each other all works and the intricacies of it, making sense of it and making sense of the world is something I'm very interested in delving into. And if you've been listening to my show regularly, you've noticed that we do cover other topics as well. But I'd say on average, the frequency of every other week, we look at relationship issues from different angles and different viewpoints. And today we're especially going to look at connections. So connections between individuals, how they form, how deep they are, and how they affect us, and how they affect us going forward in life as well. So I've had this saying said to me that sometimes people are in your life for a season, a reason, or a lifetime. And I don't know how you feel about that. I did at one point feel that you should never really truly cut anybody out of your life. I did actually at one point feel that that was just something you shouldn't do. And I sort of reasoned that it wouldn't be the right thing to do, that we don't have the right to push somebody completely away. Now, I've come to now realize that that's actually quite a dangerous approach, because sometimes people can be dangerous. They can be downright dangerous in different ways, perhaps emotionally, for example. But the reality is that we are not, as people, there's that saying, no man is an island. And there's a lot of truth in that. So we all interact with other people on a often on a daily basis. And if you think of the pandemic, how much did we struggle when suddenly that was cut off and we weren't able to interact like before? There was a massive rise in mental health issues and anxiety, for example. The type of connection we're looking at today is sometimes called a soul tie, and sometimes it's called a limbic bond. So soul ties are perhaps the more spiritual term, and limbic bond would be your psychology term for the same phenomena, essentially. And what I'll do is Later in the show, you can look forward to listening to a beautiful interview with Ellie Graham, who has a fantastic YouTube channel called Libertatem TV, which she goes into some of these issues in detail, but also in a very clear manner, which is one reason I got her on the show, to just explain a bit more about her experience of working with issues like soul ties, how they can hold people back, from entering healthy relationships, how they can keep you in a space where you're perhaps not feeling as whole and well in yourself as you could be. So what exactly are soul ties? We're going to go into that in just a moment, but first we're going to listen to our very first track this afternoon. So I guess the argument I'm putting to you is this. Is it possible, for example, to walk away from a relationship with a person you've been involved with? Is it possible to just walk away and shake it off?
Too late, got nothing in my brain. That's what people say. That's what people say. I go on too many dates, but I can't make them stay. At least that's what people say. That's what people say. But I keep cruising, can't stop, won't stop moving. It's like I got music in my mind saying it's gonna be alright. 'Cause the player's gonna play, and the hater's gonna hate, baby. I'm just gonna shake, shake it off, shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, and the faker's gonna fake, baby. I'm just gonna shake, shake it off, shake it off. I never miss a beat. I'm lightning on my feet, and that's what they don't see. That's what they don't see. I'm dancing on my own. Make the moves up as I go, and that's what they don't know. That's what they don't know. But I keep cruising, can't stop, won't stop grooving. It's like I got this music in my mind saying it's gonna be alright. 'Cause the player's gonna play, and the hater's gonna hate, baby. I'm just gonna shake it off, shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, and the faker's gonna fake, baby. I'm just gonna shake it off, shake it off, shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off, I shake it off, I shake it off, I shake it off. Hey, just think, while you've been getting down and out about the liars and the dirty cheats of the world, you could have been getting down to this sick beat. My ex-man brought his new girlfriend. She's like, oh my God, but I'm just gonna shake into the fella over there with the hella good hair. Won't you come on over, baby? We can shake. Yeah. 'Cause the player's gonna play, and the hater's gonna hate, I'm just gonna shake. I shake it off, I shake it off. Heartbreaker's gonna break, and the faker's gonna fake, baby. I'm just gonna shake. Shake it off, I shake it off. Shake it off, I shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off. Shake it off, I shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off. You got to. I shake it off, I shake it off. I shake it off, I shake it off.
So that was Taylor Swift, and her advice is that you just shake it off. If a relationship breaks up, you just shake it off. Now, is it that simple? I think some people think it is. I'll share a little bit about my background. I was brought up with very, very traditional Christian values to think that sex should only take place in marriage. But it was interesting when I was in my early 20s and I was a secretary. I remember having some sort of boyfriend trouble. And one of my bosses at the time was kindly trying to give me some advice. So he's trying to give me some advice. And his advice was that sometimes it's best to just have a physical thing with somebody. Now, I was a little bit shocked at that advice because I'd never heard it before. But he gave it quite honestly. And by that time, he was very happily married to a lovely Spanish lady. But the way he said it, I kind of got the impression that that's perhaps something he had some knowledge or experience of and viewed it as an option. So for us, is it an option to just have a physical relationship with somebody? Well, society around us teaches us that as long as it's two adults that are consenting, it's kind of up to them what they do. So there's a very liberal view that most people would hold. But does this mean that you can have casual relationships with people and get away with it? And what do I mean by that? Is it that simple? Is sex just sex? Or is there a bit more to it? Now, I'm going to bring in first the really conservative argument. Okay, this is the very conservative argument, which is based on what the Bible says. So as many of you know, I identify as a supernatural Christian. So a lot of the things that I believe are based on the Bible, and they're also based on my understanding of how the spiritual realm or the supernatural realm works. And I'm endlessly fascinated to see how it plays out here in the physical, because the two are inextricably linked in my understanding. Now, one argument that perhaps people will give is that soul ties, that phrase itself, is not in the Bible. And that is true. The word soul and tie together you cannot find, but you can find some really fascinating and very well-known verses that touch on this topic. So I'm going to share perhaps one that particularly is a strong one that kind of goes straight to the point. So in 1 Corinthians 6:16, what Paul writes is this. He says, "Or do you not know that he who is joined to a prostitute becomes one body with her? For as it is written, the two will become one flesh." Now, any of you who know a bit more about the Bible, that last part where it says the two will become one flesh is what God said when he instituted the first marriage of Adam and Eve. So there is this belief that when man and woman marry, they do somehow become one. But here, he's now highlighting the fact that you don't just become one with your wife, or your husband, you can become one with a prostitute. Now, prostitution implies a financial arrangement taking place and consensual sex, which then is often a one-off. And it is just that. It is just viewed as a service. It is a physical connection. But here he is saying that if you join a prostitute, you become one body. The same way as you become one body with your partner, be it a husband or wife, you would become one flesh with a prostitute. So that's interesting, isn't it? And in the Bible, when it talks about body, it means your whole self. It doesn't just mean your physical body. It means your whole self, your whole identity. So that would include your mind as well, and the spiritual side of things. And if you had any doubt over that, just a couple of verses later, he says about sexual immorality, which in a Bible sense would mean any sexual activity outside the marriage bond would be considered, from a biblical perspective, sexual immorality. And Paul says of that, every other sin a person commits is outside the body, but the sexually immoral person sins against his own body. So that's quite strong statements. It's implying that sex somehow connects you to another person on a deeper level, on a spiritual level, that it is not just a physical act, but there is some sort of unifying or oneness that results. Now, bearing in mind that those verses were written thousands of years ago, so we're talking about some very ancient texts. So how does that bear up in the modern era? Well, I've got a really, really interesting quote to share with you, which is written. This is written in an online newspaper called the Huffington Post. Some of you might be aware of it, and it's written by a relationship expert, and it's all about the science behind heartbreak. And one of the things that the article brings out, I'm just going to read a quote here. So this is now the modern understanding of what the Bible is trying to describe when it talks about two people becoming one through a physical connection. What the modern day version of it is what it says here. It says, whenever you have sex with someone, neurochemical changes occur in your brain that encourage limbic emotional bonding. In other words, while you may think you are just having casual sex, you are maintaining and establishing an emotional bond, whether you like it or not. And then it adds a little bit of a caveat here. It says, note that females have a larger limbic system than men and will typically be more limbically connected. And then it actually gives some advice and says, if you're trying to get over someone, don't get on top of them. Sex with the ex is stopping those chemical limbic bonds to break. So guys, there is scientific basis for this belief of a soul tie forming between people. Although I'm currently talking mainly about sexual soul ties, you can also form very strong soul ties and bonds with people that you simply spend a lot of time with and perhaps have some very deep, heartfelt conversations with. That would also form a bond with somebody. But there is something particularly deep about the physical connection causing that bond to be particularly strong. And I'm going to share a little bit more of this information that I found out when I did some research on limbic bonding. But it's fascinating to me that it is a real thing and it is a recognized thing in psychology. And the advice is obviously slightly differing depending on the relationship that you're in. If you want to deepen your relationship with your partner, well then making sure that you are having sex with them and good quality sex would be a way to deepen that bonding. And then vice versa, if your relationship is ending, that would be something to avoid. However, you do sometimes hear about people going and seeking a new relationship, perhaps sleeping with a new person to get over the previous relationship. Now, I've certainly had in the past people that I know tell me that that's exactly what they've done and they have felt that it helps. But how does that work? So you're connected to person A, you've got a bond, you want to get them out of your life. Perhaps the relationship has broken down. Maybe you're no longer seeing them, talking to them. You're hurt. Yet you will have formed that one flesh, that soul tie, that limbic connection with them. Then you go to person B and you establish a new connection with them. So this is a maths question. How many different connections did you end up with? Okay, so you can have a little think about that as I play the next song, which is just deliciously moody. I think you'll recognize this.
shadows creeping around like no one knows. Think you're so criminal. Bruises on both my knees for you. Don't say thank you. Oh please, I do what I want when I'm wanting to. My soul so cynical. So you're a tough guy, like you really rough guy. Just can't get enough guy, just always so puff guy. I'm that bad type, make your mama sad type, make your girlfriend mad type, might seduce your dad type. I'm the bad guy. Duh. Control, even if you know that you don't own me. I'll let you play the role. I'll be your animal. My mommy likes to sing along with me, but she won't sing this song if she reads all the lyrics. She'll pity the men I know. So you're a tough guy, like you really rough guy. Just can't get enough guy, just always so puff guy. I'm that bad type, make your mama sad type, make your girlfriend mad type, might seduce your dad type. I'm the bad guy. Duh. I'm pretty glad that you're alone. You said she's scared of me? I mean, I don't see what she sees, but maybe it's 'cause I'm wearing your cologne. I'm a bad guy.
So that was the inimitable Billie Eilish with Bad Guy, a hit she had a couple of years ago, and it just got so much airplay. So I imagine lots of people could relate to some of that vibe, some of that feeling in that song. So before I played her track, the question I asked you is, if you have formed a soul tie with partner A, the relationship ends, and then you form a soul tie with partner B, how many soul ties have you got still active? And often people do go quickly from one relationship to another. Not always. It's not generally recommended, but the reality is often that does happen. So you can end up in a situation where you've got several soul ties or several limbic bonds still active at the same time. Now, is that a problem? Well, it can be. It certainly can be. Because if you have that strong connection with somebody, you might still be thinking about them a lot. Things might constantly remind you of them. You might be tempted to contact them. In general, it will hold you still somehow connected. And it might be that that relationship ended for all the right reasons. That person really shouldn't be in your life. But still, yet, there remains some kind of connection because it has been formed by your body, mind, soul, and spirit. So what can you do about it? Well, we're going to look at that perhaps a bit more with Candy's interview later on. She's going to give us some tools on how to address it. But I'm going to share with you some of the deeper spiritual stuff that I have come to understand. And I do appreciate that some of the listeners will maybe think that this is a little bit too out there, but I'm going to just present you with it anyway. So I have an interest in a little bit, I suppose, fringe area even of Christianity called deliverance, which is making sense of how the spirit realm interacts with us and also making sure that we can keep the spirit realm in its rightful place and not take over our minds and bodies in a way that is undesirable. And as a result, I have listened quite a lot the teachings of a US pastor called Dr. Pat Holliday. And what she had to say about soul ties was fascinating to me. So she explained that in the spirit realm, people who can see into the spirit realm and spirits will always be able to tell who has had sex with who, because there's a mark that is left on your spirit and they will have a similar mark. So when you think of those notches on the bedpost, which is like a proverbial saying and a joke, in the spirit realm, it's a real thing, guys. It's a real thing. So in the realms of the spirit, you will have a mark on you, and your exes, whoever you've had a hookup with, will also have a similar mark. And it can also be described at times as almost like a thin thread. So in the realms of the spirit, your spirit has a thread connecting it to the other person's spirit who you have had a physical relationship with. So imagine if you've been an energetic person. Let's just call it that. Say you've been an energetic person and friendly. What would that look like? Well, it would look like you having lots of connections with lots of people. How is that going to affect you? Generally, with all of these things, there is always some sort of after effect. Especially if you're not aware of the spiritual side of things and you're not aware of how to cut those connections off safely, you could end up in a situation where you are almost being pulled in lots of different directions. And that could cause all sorts of symptoms. It might cause anxiety, it might cause depression. It might mean that it's very difficult for you to focus on one relationship. You might always feel distracted. Believe it or not, it also leaves a toll on the physical body. And this is something that I've just observed myself. People that have had a lot of sexual partners tend to physically age quicker. And I believe there is a connection. There is a connection between your lifestyle and how your body can take it. Because remember, we are not just a physical body. We are also a mind and a spirit part of that mind. So our mind is quite supernatural in itself. Yes, we have the cognitive brain, but then we've got almost like the higher brain functions that in a religious sense we would call our spirit. So that is just something for you to have a little mull over. This depth of connection we can have with people. This belief that it would show up in the spirit realm. And what Pat Holliday then went on to explain is that this is one reason why people have got so many mental health issues. Just one theory. So I'm just putting this out there as a theoretical observation of hers, which is that in her opinion, when people do have multiple sexual partners and they don't have the knowledge or know-how how to safely cut off those connections they've formed, those limbic connections, limbic ties, limbic bonds or soul ties, if they don't know how to do that and almost like claim back themselves, she calls it a fractured mind, that you end up with a fractured mind where you've effectively given pieces of yourself away. You've given pieces of yourself away to people. And even without them necessarily realizing, they're still holding on to those pieces. So you could end up having struggles that you don't really even know and understand. And it's all because of this complex thing, which is us connecting with others, our mind, body and soul being involved, as well as, all the chemicals that our physical body produces. And I'll go into that a little bit more in a minute, because there is some very interesting chemical reactions that take place that do go some way to explain this. But we're going to play. So I'm just apologizing. When I was preparing for the show today, all the songs that I kept thinking of are just slightly cheesy pop songs. So I do apologize. But here is another one for you, which relates to perhaps this situation that comes from many, many soul ties.
Baby, can't you see I'm calling? A guy like you should wear a warning. It's dangerous, I'm falling. There's no escape, I can't wait. I need a hit, baby, give me it. You're dangerous, I'm loving it. Too high, can't come down. Losing my head, spinning round and round. Till you feel me now. With a taste of your lips, I'm on the ride. You're toxic, I'm slipping up. With a taste of a poison paradise. I'm addicted to you. Don't you know that you're toxic? And I love what you do. Don't you know that you're toxic? It's getting late to give you up. I took a sip from my devil's cup. Slowly, it's taking over me. Too high, can't come down. It's in the air and it's all around. Can you feel it now? With a taste of your lips, I'm on a ride. You're toxic, I'm slipping up. With a taste of a poison paradise. I'm addicted to you. Don't you know that you're toxic? And I love what you do. Don't you know that you're toxic? Don't you know that you're toxic? Taste of your lips, I'm on the road. You're toxic, I'm slipping up. With a taste of a poison paradise. I'm addicted to you. Don't you know that you're toxic?
And that, of course, is Britney Spears. Good old Britney Spears with Toxic. I think we've all heard about toxic relationships. And I think we've all had some experience of them as well, if we are completely honest. How much of that is to do with us, how much with the other person, that's up for debate. I do believe some people you do just really hit it off with, and others it's a different story. And that just adds to the rich variety of life. See what I did there? I linked it back to the variety show. So we've looked at this fascinating concept that we form bonds with people. We form a limbic bond, a limbic connection where our mind is connecting with the other person. Whether we like it or not, especially when we are intimate with somebody, whether we like it or not, we form a connection. And we can end up with those connections with multiple people, multiple partners, all at the same time. And in a scriptural sense, that's called a soul tie. And the point is that you can have those soul ties with lots of different people. The strongest ones do tend to result from a sexual relationship. Now, is there any science to back this up? I did read a quote earlier explaining from this online article from a relationship expert explaining how you cannot really be intimate with somebody without it having really quite a profound effect on you. Now, I'm going to just read a little bit further in what she is then explaining about how our physical body is actually designed and wired to do that. So, this is now talking about a new relationship when you've just met somebody and it's really exciting and, you know, you can't stop thinking about them and they just are on your mind constantly, filling your world. Why does that happen? That exhilarating rush of pleasure and excitement. That's dopamine. Sweaty palms, increased heartbeat, overwhelming sexual desire. That's testosterone. That warm, cuddly feeling of connecting after sex. Blame it on oxytocin, which is also released when a woman gives birth and when breastfeeding, designed to make you bond. So ladies, especially us women, are very, very prone to producing a lot of oxytocin, whether you want to or not. So that's something to bear in mind. Carries on. The constant thoughts of the apple of your eye replaying like a movie reel, that's due to low serotonin, associated with obsessive thinking. Just like chemicals are released when getting together with someone new, there are also chemical reactions that occur when getting over an ex. So guys, we are to some degree at the mercy of our physical bodies and the fascinating mix and cocktail of hormones that we produce. What I would say is, in counselling, when I had clients with addiction issues, it was always dopamine related. So guys, dopamine is exciting, it makes you feel amazing, and it's also damn dangerous, because dopamine and addiction to dopamine can really get you into a lot of trouble. And that's why you sometimes end up with that situation where there's a breakup and one partner is particularly obsessive still over the other person, because there's a dopamine situation happening, which is that you're missing that release of dopamine that you used to get when you were with that person. So that can make it quite difficult with breakups, for example. And science shows that the part of the brain that often is activated with recently broken up singles is that particular same area, which is where the release of dopamine seen in drug addiction also occurs. So these are quite difficult things for us to be dealing with. It's not an easy thing. Breakups are not easy. They can take a lot of time to get over. And I think it's good to understand the reasons behind it. It is simply how we are designed. It's how we relate to each other, how we form those connections. So it's quite important to remember to be patient with yourself and understand that this is how it works. But with great knowledge comes great responsibility, great power and responsibility. So now that we've been talking about this, what implications does it have on our life? Well, that's not really for me to say. That is something you need to think about. You need to now be aware of the fact that actually you're a very powerful being, because you can connect on a deep level with people with relative ease. And you can certainly form these soul ties, limbic bonds. Most people form them quite easily. I know I do. I know that this information for me has been an absolute game changer. And I'll share a recent example. I was talking to somebody, getting to know somebody, and started to really get, emotionally involved, and starting to, as a woman especially, starting to think, well, this person is a potential future partner, and lots of strong feelings very quickly were developing, and just things that indicated there is a connection. I could tell sometimes this person was thinking of me. I'm very sensitive like that. I can often tell if somebody I have a connection with is, for example, thinking about me. I can just sense it. And then, lo and behold, I hear from them or we connect. And I'm like, okay, I picked up on a real thing. So I was in a situation where I was very rapidly forming a strong bond with this person. People around me had some concerns about the person's suitability. Now, I can honestly admit that I don't have the best judge of character. Certainly not in a romantic sense. I believe in other areas of life, yes. But when it comes to the romantic side of things, yes, I have fallen for lots of bad boys in my time and then paid really heavily for that. So again, I was repeating a pattern of behavior, and we're going to talk about patterns of behavior a bit more in Candy's interview. But I was falling right back into the pattern that I certainly struggled with in my early 20s. So now, even though I'm older and supposedly wiser, there I was just going straight back into a similar situationship as I had done many, many times before, because I'd formed a connection with the person and I thought that they're amazing and I have all these feelings. Then I have people pulling me up on it and giving me a reality check. And guys, it was painful. I even did something really rude that I don't normally ever do. And I threw the phone down on somebody who was confronting me about this choice and just presenting me with some reality check facts about the person I was considering getting involved with. However, it took 3 different people speaking to me, but then I got the message loud and clear. And I actually feel that God was using those people to just give me a warning to stop, think about what you're doing. Don't allow that cocktail of exciting hormones that's whizzing around your body and mind and that connection you formed take over, because it can. Soul ties are very powerful. They can absolutely make your life amazing, or they can completely screw you over. And, that was the danger in this situation. So what did I do? Thankfully, I learnt about soul ties a couple of years ago already. And after having confronted the realities of whether this relationship was going to be a healthy one, whether it actually had potential and longevity, and was it realistic, and was it going to serve me and the other person, that was also a thing. I realized, and I think this helped me a lot, is realizing that that person cannot offer me what I want, and I cannot offer them what they want and need. So that helped a lot. And once I had made the decision, being a Christian, I took it to prayer. And I said a prayer to break the tie between us. And I can honestly say that I did that prayer, went to bed, and I woke up the next day feeling completely different. Effectively, job done. And thankfully, because it hadn't been a very long time, yes, I was a little bit sad for a few days, but because we hadn't been involved for very long, and I had done this severing of that connection very deliberately for the other person's good as well as my own, it worked beautifully. And I was able to then just really marvel that I ever thought that it was a good idea. I woke up and smelt the roses, or is it smell the coffee? One or the other, or both, most likely. So that's my personal story of how understanding of this limbic connection soul tie is really important. Now, if you're not a person of faith and you're not particularly prone or interested in praying about that connection, you can even just make a declaration. Our words are very powerful when we speak it over ourselves, our lives. So I would recommend a phrase that I sometimes use as part of a prayer, but you could use it just on its own. So you could say the person's name. Let's just make up a name. Say his name was Jim. So I would say, perhaps repeatedly for a time period, just to make sure it's really embedding in reality and on your mind on a subconscious level, you could say, I separate the spirit, energy, and life force of Jim from me. So I separate the spirit, energy, and life force of Jim from myself. And then you can also do like a powerful visualization. You can imagine in your mind's eye those cords being cut, that link between you two being cut. But you don't have to even do it in a harsh way. You can just imagine it being cut, and you can imagine you just placing that person at a distance in a safe place. And just imagine them there, safely at a distance. And we have different ways of coping with loss, and different ways of marking and ending. So, you can maybe find and discover all sorts of different ways that might then work for you to help with this. But it's very interesting. So in a Christian setting, people would recommend prayer and maybe some help with a professional or a trusted person who can understand some of this stuff to talk through and pray through getting over a relationship and cutting off any of these soul ties, these bonds that have formed. And it's interesting, this article that is certainly not at all religious from what I can tell, or faith-based, they sort of talk about a similar thing. They talk about the fact that there are steps you can take when you're leaving a relationship behind to sort of reduce that bonding. And it's going to take time. Spending time with close friends would help. Having some stability, having a daily routine. And expect it to be hard, because you're almost breaking off an addiction in a way, quite often. Even if the relationship was bad, you still have residual ties to that person from the time you've spent around them. So there is an interesting thing. And there's also a program, a psychological program that has been developed to help people with breakups. And it says that the program bridges the gap between science and spirituality to help you process emotions and patterns from the past and rewire your subconscious mind to help you have healthier relationships in the future. So even if it's a long time since you broke up with somebody or a relationship ended, have a little think, is there still some residual tie? And is there something I can do? Are there some steps I can take to just process that and make sure that I do not have connections with people from the past that might be impacting on the present? So, this is some of the things that I've been thinking about. And please do let me know if you've got any feedback, if you've got any questions, you've got any thoughts around this, please do get in touch. Okay. I'm going to play you another song. And this is now about really and truly some of the aims of where we would like to get to.
There must be a higher love down in the heart or hidden in the stars above. Without it, life is a wasted time. Look inside your heart and I'll look inside mine. Things look so bad everywhere in this whole world. What is fair? We walk the line and try to see, falling behind what could be. Oh, bring me a higher love. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love. Where's that higher love? I keep thinking of. Bring me higher love. Worlds are turning, and we're just hanging on, facing our fear and standing out there alone. I yearn, yeah, and it's real to me. There must be someone who's feeling for me. Things look so bad everywhere in this whole world. What is fair? We walk the line and try to see, falling behind and what could be. Oh, bring me a higher love, my Lord. Bring me a higher love. Oh, bring me a higher love, my Lord. It's that higher love I keep thinking of. Bring me higher love. Bring me higher love. Bring me higher love. Bring me higher love.
And that is Whitney Houston remixed by Kygo, Higher Love. And I just love the beat. It's a very upbeat song. And also, even though we're talking about quite a serious, heavy topic today, I don't want anybody really to feel laden down with any of this information. It's just part of life. It is part of life that we form these bonds with people. And it's part of life that at times they don't become lifelong, lasting bonds. And they end and they break off. And they need to break off for a very good reason. I'm going to share some thoughts from an article that does look at this from a more Christian perspective. Because I think these are views that are not popular. But these are views that I believe are still worth certainly knowing about and considering. And this is really reflections on that verse I talked about earlier, which is talking about how two people that are physically intimate become one flesh. And there's some explanations given here. When it talks about becoming one in body or one flesh, it doesn't mean our flesh is fused. It means your whole self is involved. Your whole self is given away. Your whole self, your personality and identity is bonded to another person. Sex is not just a physical act that leaves the real you unaffected. It profoundly changes you. And it's also a way to give to another person. So it's a beautiful thing. This is a beautiful thing. You're sharing yourself with another person. You're choosing to share yourself with another person. But with anything that's powerful, it can be a force for good or for bad. And the article then kind of goes on to examine that bit by asking this question, that we see this all the time. If sex is just like eating cake, then why does adultery feel so painful? Because sex involves your whole self, and so people feel personally betrayed. Because sex is not just a physical act, your whole self is involved. And this is true. This is certainly something that I believe the majority of people will experience. Not everybody, there are exceptions. And I can't fully explain why those exceptions seem to exist. Whether those people just don't form the bonds as strongly, that is a possibility. But for the majority of people, for example, something like adultery does bother them. It does stay with them. Whether it's the person who commits the adultery or the person who's been hurt, there's a very profound effect. And then another point that I would like to also share. Another point I'd like to share is really like just talking about that connection that forms. And there's a very good example given of it. So PVA glue is stronger than wood. If you glue two bits of wood together and then pull them apart, it's not the glue that breaks, it's the wood. It splinters. And that's what happens whenever you have sex outside of marriage. You splinter your soul. That's quite a powerful statement. I would perhaps add a caveat that when you have sex with somebody you're not in a committed relationship with, that's when you do risk that pain. You risk breaking perhaps a bit of yourself. So really this conversation, I started it just to get people to have a little think about, is this a real thing? Should we be concerned about it? And if I have an understanding of how deeply I have the ability to bond with people, is it going to change the way I live my life and the people I choose to bond with? It's almost like I want you to see that we have, as individual humans, we have a superpower within us. And that superpower is our ability to become one and bond with another person. And now that you're aware of this superpower, and it's a superpower that you can either really give and bless another person, or you can also use it in a way that is harmful to yourself and the other person. How does that make you feel? How does that make you feel? And I'm just going to now play a real classic. Well, I'm going to leave that thought for you to think about. This is a real soulful classic that I'm going to play. That kind of touches on the topic as well. So enjoy.
Oh, baby, now let's get down tonight. Ooh, baby, I'm hot just like an oven. I need some loving. And baby, I can't hold it much longer. It's getting stronger and stronger. When I get that feeling, I want sexual healing, sexual healing. Oh, baby, makes me feel so fine. Helps to relieve my mind. Sexual healing, baby, is good for me. Sexual healing is something that's good for me. Whenever blue teardrops are falling and my emotional stability is leaving me, there is something I can do. I can get on the telephone and call you up, baby. And honey, I know you'll be there to relieve me. The love you give to me will free me. If you don't know the thing you're dealing, oh, I can tell you, darling, that it's sexual healing. Get up, get up, get up, get up. Let's make love tonight. Wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. 'Cause you do it right. Baby, I got sick this morning. A sea was storming inside of me. Baby, I think I'm capsizing. The waves are rising and rising. And when I get that feeling, I want sexual healing. Sexual healing is good for me. Makes me feel so fine. It's such a rush. Helps to relieve the mind. And it's good for us. Sexual healing, baby, it's good for me. Sexual healing is something that's good for me. And it's good for me. And it's so good to me, my baby. Come take control. Just grab a hold of my body and mind. Soon we've been making it, honey. Oh, we're feeling fine. You're my medicine. Open up and let me in. Darling, you're so great. I can't wait for you to operate. I can't wait for you to operate. When I get this feeling, I need sexual healing. Oh, when I get this feeling, I need sexual healing. I got to have sexual healing, darling. 'Cause I'm all alone. I need sexual healing, darling. Till you come back home. Please don't procrastinate. It's not good to masturbate.
Billy Ray was a preacher's son, and when his daddy would visit, he'd come along. When they gathered around and started talking, that's when Billy would take me walking. Out through the backyard we go walking. Then he looked into my eyes. Lord knows to my surprise, the only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Yes, he was. Being good isn't always was the son of a preacher man.
Yes, he was. He was. Lord knows he was.
Yes, he was.
How well I remember the look was in his eyes, stealing kisses from me on the slide, taking time to make time, telling me that he's all mine, learning from each other's knowing, looking to see how much we've grown, and the only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man. The only boy who could ever teach me was the son of a preacher man. Yes, he was. He was. Oh, yes, he was.
The only one who could ever reach
He
me
was the sweet talking son of a preacher man.
The only boy who could ever teach me
Like you
was
say,
the
the
son of a preacher
man.
man. The only one who could ever fool me
Sweet.
was the son of a preacher man. The only one who could ever fool me was the son of a preacher man. The only one who could ever reach me was the son of a preacher man.
Welcome back. This is the Variety Show with Samantha every Friday afternoon. So make sure you tune in and you don't miss any of the many and varied interesting topics and exciting guests, as well as, of course, some great music in between. So make sure you always tune in, and make sure you listen to Feferity Radio at other times as well, because there is lots and lots of interesting programming to choose from, as well as amazing playlists. So if you need a playlist for your life, make sure it's Feferity Radio. Today, we've been revisiting the topic that is a bit of a favorite of mine, which is examining relationships, and relationships especially between romantic partners. We've been talking about soul ties or limbic bonds, which is another, perhaps a bit more commonly accepted word or way to describe them. And I've already shared really two different understandings of soul ties. One from a more scientific relationship psychology perspective, and the other from the more of a faith perspective, and especially how the Bible and the Christian faith would understand soul ties as a thing and as a spiritual thing. Now, whatever your views on this, you're going to really, really enjoy the interview that I'm about to play for you. So this is an interview that I have pre-recorded because sadly she couldn't make it to the studio today, but it's an interview with Ellie Graham, an amazing, inspiring lady who has overcome many things in her own life. She shares quite openly in her in her YouTube channel Libertatem TV, which is worth a look into. She shares a lot of her own story, and a lot of how she really sought out healing for herself, for a number of reasons to do with family issues and the way she had been treated and the experiences of bad relationships she had in the past as a result of her childhood, really. How she found healing and how she then got to a point where not only was she doing much better herself and is in a very, very secure, loving relationship, but she was also able to train and help other people make sense of things, do the work on themselves, do the healing in different areas in order to be able to enjoy healthy relationships. With all my guests, I always give them an opportunity to pick some songs that are particularly close to their heart. So I'm going to play a choice of candies first before we get into the interview. And this is her choice. It is Dreams by Gabrielle.
Move a step closer, you know that I question of time. I knew we'd be together and that you'd be mine. I want you here forever. Do you hear what I'm saying? Gotta say how I feel. I can't believe it, but I know that you're real. I know what I want, and baby, it's you. Can't deny my feelings because they are true, yeah. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. I'd seen you sometimes on your own ending cries. I knew I had to have you. My horse and let me die. Now you're by my side, and I feel so good. I'm nothing too hard, don't feel that I ever could. Do you hear what I'm saying? Gotta say how I feel. I can't believe you're here, but I know that you're real. I know what I want, and baby, it's you. Can't deny my feelings because they are true, yeah. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. I'm not making plans for tomorrow. Let's live for tonight. I know I want you, baby. So hold me so tight. Put your arms around me. You make me feel so safe. Can you whisper in my ear that you're here to stay? Yeah. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. Dreams can come true. Look at me, babe, I'm with you. You know you got to have hope. You know you got to be strong. Dreams can come true.
And that is Dreams by Gabrielle. And next we're going to be starting the interview with Candy Ellie Graham. So please do enjoy. And also, if there are any questions or thoughts or feedback that the subject I've been looking at today has brought up for you, feel free to put a comment on the Feferity Radio YouTube feed. So there'll be a live on at the moment of this show. So you can put a comment there, or you can contact us through Feferity Radio London. You can also message me directly on WhatsApp if you want to, and the number is 077 66 66 3546. So 77 66 66 3546. So feel free to give me some feedback and your thoughts and questions on the subject of the ties, the connections we form with people that we are especially intimate with. And here is an interview that is recorded with Candy Ellie Graham, who has quite a lot to say on this and other subjects relating to relationships. Do enjoy. Sorry, just one moment. We're going to try and run that interview again in a minute. Just one moment. Which one? This one? Okay, let's go again. So welcome, Candy.
Hi Samantha. So great to be.
Okay, sorry about this, guys. This is the first time I'm using a pre-record, so there's a little bit of some teething problems in setting it up. There is also the option of, let me just opening. Okay. Let's try something else. I've just had a thought as to what might work. If I play it off this. If I play it off this, that might work. Let me just try that. Sorry, guys. I have this beautifully edited ready for you to listen to. Let's try again.
Great to be here today.
I'm really pleased that you agreed to come on the variety show. You're a lady who has lots and lots of different projects on at the same time. So would you like to maybe initially just introduce some of them? I know you're very involved with the Cultural Style Week.
Yes. So I guess if I was to sum myself up in one sentence, I'm passionate about helping people feel beautiful on the inside and on the outside. So as the founder of Styles Mag and Cultural Style Week, these are platforms and initiatives that exist to celebrate the cultural diversity of people, you know, the uniqueness of their heritage, you know, through fashion, hair and beauty. Cultural Style Week is an annual event that takes place each year from the 21st to the 27th of May. And people take part through hosting their own national dress celebrations and wearing their traditional clothes. And on the flip side to that, I'm also an inner healing prayer minister, currently serving with a ministry called Ellie Ministries. And I have a I call it a YouTube channel, but somebody said it was a YouTube ministry, which for me makes it a bit scary. But I guess, you know, the Lord does what he needs to do through that. It's called Libertatem TV. Libertatem is the Latin word for for freedom and healing. And it's all about helping people find freedom from things that can affect their quality of life.
Thank you. Just a great recap of the many, many things that you're doing. As much as I'm excited about the Cultural Style Week, because having lived in London my adult life, one of the things that I have felt is the most exciting thing about living in London is that even among my close friends, there's a whole variety of different ethnic backgrounds and styles that come with it. So I've been able to explore different types of food and cuisine and different types of style. And I like to think that it's kind of influenced me to grow in different ways. So I might well get you back next spring to talk about that in advance.
That'd be wonderful.
Yeah, because that's another topic in itself to just explore, isn't it?
Yes.
And one that's like close to our heart. But it is your Libertatem TV that really kind of caught me, because you cover. I was sent the link, and then once I started looking at your videos, what struck me is they're very clear. You keep it simple, so it's easy to understand what you're saying. I love the fact that you've got such a warmth about the way you deliver them, and you touch on so many of the topics that I've already explored in the variety show, but you also go deeper. Yeah, so you also go deeper on subjects, which is why you're here today, for me to interview and a little bit get you to share some of that with the listeners.
Very excited to do so. I haven't been able to do it for a while, so it's lovely to be able to talk about it again as I get ready to make more content.
Well, a lot of the topics that you speak about, even if the video has been up for a year or something, these are issues that are just common to mankind. So we all struggle with some of those issues. So I don't think the content in any way is going to age. If anything, I think it's going to become, if anything, I'd say it's getting more and more relevant. So just to start kind of picking your brain a little bit, a lot of your videos do talk about relationships, and they talk about some of the work that might be necessary for us to do in order for us to be ready to really have fulfilling relationships.
Definitely. So I cover topics such as soul ties, not just sexual soul ties, soul ties that exist between family and friends. And for those of you listening and you're thinking, what on earth is a soul tie? What is she talking about? Well, a soul tie is a name that we give in Christianity to spiritual connections that we have with other people. And, for the most part, they're supposed to be very beautiful, godly connections that, help people connect with each other, in an intimate way that's healthy and progressive. But then there are negative aspects to that. So, for example, when people engage in sexual activities outside of marriage, sometimes ungodly soul ties can be formed, which can affect people in adverse ways. And I talk about that and break it down. I also talk a little bit about, the psychological side of it, because if you're not a person of faith, or if you're not spiritual, you might think, that's all hocus pocus. But there is in science a theory known as a limbic bond that is formed when two people have a sexual connection, and it's almost like a form of attachment. People feel connected to each other, and it's very, very hard to pull away. And apparently the female limbic system is a lot larger than the men's, which is why females tend to take on the brunt of this, this emotional pain when relationships don't work well or last as long and there's been a sexual connection. So those are some of the things that I talk about. But then I also go deeper into, family trauma, generational trauma, rejection. The other things that can affect us, not just having healthy romantic relationships, but just relationships with people in general. So if you've experienced a lot of rejection, you can become sensitive to rejection, and you might perceive rejection where there isn't any rejection there, which makes it harder for you to connect with people. Then you end up feeling more isolated and rejected. And in that place of isolation, in a Christian sense, we say that you are sometimes more vulnerable to negative spirits, negative attacks, because your thoughts are quite negative, they're insular, and you're repeating these things to yourself over and over again. And in a Christian sense, we say it's an open doorway to demonic torment, because you're giving them permission to just terrorize you and torment you. So I won't talk too much, but that's just just to round up on that particular area of relationships.
There's two things there that I'll probably look at separately.
Yeah.
I'll just carry on from the last one, and then we'll go back to the soul ties, which is a fascinating thing in itself. But when you're talking about this, having almost like a projected negative expectation of people because of past hurt, past experiences. I remember when I trained as a counsellor, we used to talk about similar things. And it's very interesting to me now to look at the Christian perspective on things and then look at the psychology perspective, because often we're talking about the same things, but we just may be using a different name. And I remember some of the things that I was taught. One was that people do repeat behavioral patterns, and it's quite hard to sometimes break those. So part of the idea of any kind of therapy or counseling or mentoring often is to make you aware of what you're doing, which is not helping you. And we would often even use the phrase, life becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And that's kind of what you're talking about. If you're putting out a very negative attitude, thinking, well, all I ever get is rejection, nobody likes me, you're going to give off that vibe to everybody. Because whatever our beliefs, we all know that everybody can pick up on a vibe, a spirit around a person and an attitude, and that's all to do with the spiritual. So what would you advise then? So say, for example, I reflect on some of my relationships in the past and some of the challenges I've had, and I come to the conclusion that because of past rejection, I'm approaching things negatively, and that's bringing on those kinds of issues you're talking about. Perhaps I'm not feeling great in myself. Perhaps I'm finding that relationship after relationship struggles or runs into problems. What would you advise somebody in that situation to do?
Okay, that's a very good question. And I think the fact that somebody has already acknowledged that there is an issue, that is so powerful, because being able to view and acknowledge that there's an issue is almost it is the first step. And it's a very important first step. There are two ways that one could approach this, and I like to do a combination of both. First of all, I suggest speaking to somebody who is a trained prayer minister, but also with a psychological background, and there are some of them around. Reason being is because sometimes in the church, in traditional churches, everything is blamed on the devil. And, to some extent, I can agree, but work will need to be done with you to help you understand, what is at the root, when did this thing actually start? So you're recognizing it, for example, at a midpoint, but it might go back, to your childhood, or it might go back further than you. And by speaking to the right people, they will help you identify when that behavior pattern started and what is at the root of it. And they will help you go back to the root to try and clip it there or start to fix it there. Some things are easy to identify. So, for example, a friend might have betrayed you, and with friendships, your barriers are completely down. So betrayal or disappointment, it's going to hurt a lot because you wasn't expecting it, and that might be the wound that then, affected you trusting people and having these negative insular thoughts. And, a prayer minister or a counselor might walk you backwards to forgive that friend and, break agreement with the mindset that said, everyone is going to do this to me, or I am justified in behaving this way because that person did that to me. And it's a daily process. Meaning your mind, your neural pathways would have been reprogrammed over time to respond a certain way. So you can't just one day decide to change and then from every day onwards decide that, just walk in unlimited freedom. It has happened with prayer before. I've seen miracles done. But for the most part, God says, you have to renew your mind daily. It really is a journey. So you have to learn how to replace those negative thought patterns with positive ones. So just to give a ballpark answer, if you notice that there is an issue, I have a video with 4 steps, like 4 basic steps on how to get to the root of the problem and acknowledge there's an issue. Is first of all, speak to someone about it. If you can't speak to someone about it, write it down in your own words and keep a journal. It's almost like a prayer journal or a thought journal. Write down, interview yourself. How do you feel? I feel like this. Okay, why do you feel like this? What do you remember? And if you're Christian, ask God in, Lord, I feel really hurt today because somebody said this, but it's more than what they said, Why do I feel this hurt? And listen. God might give you a thought or a memory, and that might be at the root of what is causing that issue. And then you can work from there. If you need to forgive someone, I do have a prayer about forgiveness. Forgiveness is not just a spiritual thing, guys. It's not just for Christians. It's for everyone. Unforgiveness, or that feeling of anger that we internalize, it attracts toxins in our body, which can make us sick. On a spiritual side, it opens up to demonic torment. So forgiveness is a major part of healing, and it's not you giving them a pass. It's you saying, I don't want to give this situation permission to hurt me any more than it has done, and you're allowed to cut people off. I say this all the time. If being in a friendship or relationship with that person who has hurt you, is still hurting you, you're allowed to cut them off. They don't have to be in your life anymore. Everyone's journey is going to be different, but as a first point, be willing to ask yourself difficult questions and get some help in asking those questions if you can.
I think you've made some really, really important points. I liked what you said about taking some personal responsibility, that we can't just blame other people or blame the devil. Yes, other people and the devil will sometimes have a part to play, depending on how much we allow them to. But that's the key, isn't it? Because the Bible says, oppose the devil and he will flee. So I like the fact that it's actually saying, well, the onus is on us to say no. We are the ones to have to take control, take authority over ourselves, our minds and our lives, and say, look, there's things here I need to change, and there's things here that I need to perhaps remove from around me or work through in order to be able to move forward, in order to be able to get to a healthier place and engage with people in a healthier manner.
You're not completely responsible in doing it yourself. Anyone listening, please never feel like it's absolutely up to them, because if you've had a lot of traumatic experiences, you're going to be tired. You're going to slip up, you're going to fail. Don't think that because you didn't have the strength to say no to the devil on one day that it means you're not getting it right. It really, really is a journey, and there are things that I still have to, remind myself of and go back to, but God has just given me that grace that he's a God of love and grace and patience. And a lot of our walk with God, sorry, I'm getting very Christian now, but a lot of the walk with God is learning that you are not walking alone, that you can just be raw. Even if you fall 100 times, you can get up 100 times confidently and saying, I failed again, help me, and if it's done with a sincere heart, the slate is indeed wiped clean. And for those of you who don't believe in God, or you're not a person of faith, again, I still urge you to please be patient with yourself. Like an iceberg, you can only see the tip. You do not know what's under the water. You don't know what is in your DNA, what your parents have passed down to you, in terms of behavior patterns, thoughts, feelings. So you can't work through certain things on your own. So don't try to. Do what you can and seek help for the things that you can't, and love yourself, cheer yourself on, and celebrate every victory.
And that's the second point I wanted to highlight, which is don't try and do it on your own. Well, you can start. I would say you can take some steps. I mean, one good step would be, like you said, start keeping a journal. How you're feeling day by day, what challenges you're facing. Can you see patterns? Can you really understand perhaps why certain things are triggering you? The other thing that you can do is start reading, and maybe, looking at YouTube videos, like resources like Libertatem TV is a good one to start off with, because your videos are relatively short and clear, but very thought-provoking. And there's always ideas at the end on how to tackle the issue, how to get healing, how to get that kind of spiritual, addressing it spiritually through prayer, or by if you're not a person of prayer, you could use them as affirmations and speak them out, because our words have a lot of power. What we speak over ourselves, again, becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And this is something that psychology and counseling recognizes, because they will give people positive affirmations to speak regularly throughout the day to build up perhaps a different image of yourself and a different mindset. As a Christian, you would do it in form of confessions and perhaps bring in some suitable scriptures. But the principle is the same. You speak it out into your life, and then you seek help, and you're open to seeking help. And certainly in my case, I can honestly say that God has continued to send me amazing Christian mentors and individuals who all have contributed in different ways. But he's also used people that are not Christian, because God can use anyone and God can speak through anyone. So what I would say for anybody, both Christians and non-Christians out there, is just be open to people that come into your life, and be open to how they might be able to contribute. And don't allow your preconceived notions about who and what they are to stop you from listening to what they say and going away and thinking about it.
Yes.
And ask people for honest feedback. Because that's sometimes the thing that's missing, is we're not always honest with each other. We're not bold enough, courageous enough to say, I really like you as a friend, but this thing you do is annoying and you keep doing it and it's pushing me away. And it might have done that to other people.
Yeah. I think when feeding back, though, do it with discernment, because if a person is still quite fragile and they're not in a position or place where they can receive that feedback and in a positive way, you could do more damage than good. So I would say just try and use some discernment if you do have to give somebody negative feedback about their behavior. One of the ways I've done it is through sometimes sending clips, either Instagram videos or YouTube videos that kind of highlight and explain some of the behaviors that they're exhibiting without sounding accusatory. So maybe, because it's easier to see faults in others than to recognize them in ourselves initially. And if you're on the receiving end, if a lot of people have told you maybe you're very critical or, maybe you're just too anxious, don't let those words become a wound and a curse. Hear it from them and go away and work on it privately. If it gets to a point where, it's becoming very painful hearing it from the same people, just say to them, look, I've heard you, something I'm aware of, I'm working on it, please be patient with me, because you want to feel safe and loved around your friendship group. And just one thing in regards to speaking to people, a lot of the people who have messaged me off the back of watching some of my videos have said they're alone. They don't have a Christian community. They don't have people in their household who they can talk to. I've even had some people who are Muslim reach out to me. They don't want to convert, but they just don't have anyone they can talk to about things that have come up in their videos. And I can understand in my videos, and I can understand it can feel very isolating when you recognize there's a problem, but you just don't know who can I talk to about this? Who can I trust? And I've been there before, and what God did for me was he led me to resources. Resources are not the same as speaking to someone, but seeing that I wasn't the only one. There were other people out there like me who had been through this, who were going through this. That was a major part of my healing as well, knowing that I'm not alone in how I'm feeling and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. So if you are alone, seek resources, journal. This sounds crazy as well, but go on talking walks. We have hand-free kits now, so you won't look crazy, but just go for a walk. There's something about being out in nature that is really healing to the body and mind. And talk. Say everything that's on your mind. If you're not a journal person, like as if you would pray or as if you would talk to someone. And I say this to people who have struggled praying because they think prayer is like, this holy ritual where you have to I said, release all your inhibitions, open your mouth and rant. If it's a rant, just get it out. There's something very healing about speaking out what is inside you, releasing it, and just believing that someone or something has heard and a change is going to happen. So if you're on your own, talking walks, journaling, watching other resources from people that have been through it will really help.
There is science to back up that talking while you're walking works. One of my counselling lecturers offered her clients the sessions, instead of having them in a room, that they would meet up somewhere and they would walk and talk. And I used it. Yeah, I used it a couple of times with a client very successfully, because there's something about you walking and moving that actually moves your cognition further, quicker. So it helps process. It helps the brain process. There's something about being physically in motion that helps your brain process better. So there's definitely psychology and science behind doing what you just recommended. And yes, I think many people hesitate to pray because they think there has to be some sort of formula. There isn't.
Yep.
If you look at Jesus' prayers, they're extremely simple and heartfelt. And God wants to be, God, the creator, whatever you want to call him, he wants to be your friend. He wants to be a listener. And all the things we're dealing with, well, we're here because of the way we were made. And this world is because, you know, something he brought forth. As much as there is obviously some more complex things going on with, you know, the fight between good and bad and light and darkness, evil and good. But the reality is that he's given us amazing resources. So some of the tips so far from Candy: increase your self-awareness, work with somebody, get some support. And if you're really, really struggling, there is absolutely no shame in going to see your doctor. Because if you need to see a professional, if you need to get some counseling referrals, if you need to even get some medication to manage through a difficult time, a difficult patch in your life, there is absolutely no shame in doing that. There's actually a course of wisdom in doing that. And one of the interesting things that I used to say quite a lot to my clients as a counselor was that people who seek out counseling, people who seek out therapy, people who seek out mentoring and coaching, they tend to be psychologically healthier than the average. Because it takes courage to do that, and it takes initiative, and it takes you saying, okay, I'm struggling. I don't want to be struggling. I want to be succeeding. How can I get past this, and how can I move forwards? I need help, and I'm going to get that help. So I would say that I would recommend people do that. And there's various ways of doing it. Like we said, you can start by finding resources, by starting to keep a journal, being open to people that come into your life, and maybe opportunities to get professional advice and support as well. Going back to something we started on, but we didn't really explore, if I just may ask you a little bit more about soul ties. So I'm just going to explain to you quickly what I've understood it to be, which is essentially whenever we interact with somebody with a degree of closeness, depth, or intimacy, we form a connection to varying degrees with that person. We often talk about soul ties with somebody we've been physically intimate with, and that certainly does always establish it. And I like the fact that it's also got like a scientific name to it. Soul ties is perhaps indicating the more spiritual connection that forms. And then to kind of give it a scientific explanation, it's called a limbic bond or a limbic connection, which is quite well recognized. I'm going to give you an example of what I think is a soul tie manifesting. You know, when sometimes you're thinking about a friend and they ring you. Yeah, I was giving as an example of those instances where you think of somebody and then they ring you in that moment. And to me, that indicates there's some kind of connection that's, you know, almost like a spiritual connection. Would you say that would be the type of thing to indicate a soul tie?
I wouldn't say that's a soul tie, because that's happened with me and recruitment agencies, journalists, people I don't necessarily have a connection with, a deep connection with. But I would say that I believe we are spiritual beings, and we do put out spiritual signals. You know, there are spiritual radio waves. So sometimes if you're thinking of someone, they might pick up on that and they might call you or text you. For me, that's what I would put that in. And I guess in a worldly sense, it could just be a coincidence. You know, sometimes I sit and think about £1 million, but it doesn't end up in my bank account.
Although you do sometimes hear stories of people who've managed to manifest things like that as well, and I'm not quite sure how that works, but okay.
I'm not quite sure either. I'm not quite sure. Yeah.
So with soul ties, perhaps the most what I would say is about the soul ties that form when you have physical intimacy or sex with somebody, there's definitely like also a physiological basis. I think it's quite well documented that, for example, women's bodies will produce oxytocin as a result of having sex with somebody, which then starts to create an emotional bond. So as much as we like to think that that's not the case, that you can just have a physical relationship with somebody, the reality and even the science kind of shows, well, actually you can't. That's a really impossible thing to do. I think men work slightly differently, but soul ties are formed either way from both parties.
Yes, I agree. And for the reason why it can be quite healthy or quite damaging is because you are not only connecting spiritually, in a spiritual sense with that person, it's whoever they've been with, and it's whatever generational spiritual issues that are undealt with that they are still carrying. So I can give a clear example of somebody I know who went on to have really bad mental health issues. She felt like she was seeing things after having a sexual relationship with somebody who had the same condition. So I don't know any medical reason for that to happen. That's just one example. But then obviously, I guess in this day and age, it's about being sexually liberated and being with who you want, when you want. And I mean, I don't know how they truly feel about that inside, if they truly feel liberated and by being that free sexually. But personally, and as a Christian, it's not something that I would recommend for people to do.
It's interesting because 2 weeks ago I had on here a relationship and sex solutions coach who said a similar thing as advice, especially to single people, to limit, your sexual activity. One thing I think that I've also heard of is I know somebody who had a relationship with somebody who was bipolar, and even though the relationship has ended, that person is now really, really struggling with their own mental health and really fighting to not become seriously compromised in that area. And it does seem interesting that there's been that closeness and interaction. But I think whether you have a physical relationship with somebody or not, just spending a lot of time with somebody who's very unstable is going to drain you, and it's going to have an effect on your psyche and mental health. And then when you bring in the spiritual connection that forms through that type of association, you're adding to it. Let's, for example, take myself as an example. Couple of I'm somebody who's a divorcee. My ex-husband had quite a lot of issues. Mental health issues, alcoholism addiction. Maybe there's a couple of people I've seen since the divorce. I've been divorced for almost 10 years, so that's quite a long time ago now. Let's say that I've never done any work around soul ties. What would you recommend I do, given that I most likely have soul ties with more than one previous partner? What would you advise me to do in that situation?
Okay, one thing I would advise you to do in that situation is to go through a process to break those soul ties. And that involves, in a Christian sense, first of all, repenting of the sin, not because God hates you because you had sex with somebody outside of marriage. It's just that in order for God to come in and undo the damage, you need to give him permission, and you need to acknowledge that that's not his will for you. So it starts with, saying, God, okay, this was something I did. Maybe I didn't know you at the time. If I did know you, maybe I was just lonely and I needed that comfort. Whatever it is, just confess to God. You recognize it's not something he approves of. And then ask him to come and cut all of the ungodly ties between you and that person, and to detach from both of you things that are not meant to be carried by either of you. So it's a process of, Lord, I'm sorry I committed sexual sin with X, Y, and Z. Please forgive me. Please come and detach from me all the ungodly parts of our soul tie connection, and restore to me the person you want me to be, and to restore to them the person you want them to be. And it was something I had to do before I got married. And the most powerful breaking of soul ties was literally a few months before I met my husband. I didn't realize just how much I was holding on to past memories, experiences, thinking of what ifs with other people, that these were not healthy situations at all, but there was a connection there that I didn't know how to break. And once they were broken, I felt free. I felt visible to my husband, to attract a healthy relationship.
That's really valuable advice. And once I became a born-again Christian, once I was saved, and I started to hear and understand about things like soul ties, I was absolutely prompted to pray. And even my ex-husband, it was 7 years since the divorce. I'd say weeks and even months would pass. I wouldn't even think about him. Yet I got a very clear word from the Lord that I should also break that soul tie with him. So there was still something residual there, even if I wasn't conscious of it. So it can be on quite a sort of subconscious, unconscious level that we still have these connections to people. So every time you are intimate with somebody, or you spend a lot of time with a person and have a close friendship, doesn't have to. Soul ties aren't just sexual. They can be from somebody who's a close friend or a family member that you've spent significant time with. And, that can also sometimes be something that needs to be addressed if it's not healthy.
Definitely. And for people listening, I love what Samantha just mentioned, saying it could also be a close friend. I think people don't realize how powerful and important our friendships are with people. The people we see as our sisters or brothers, they're not, there's no blood connection, but you're just that close. These people have a lot of influence over your life, over your sense of self, and over your emotion. So if things haven't gone well, if there's been hurt on either side and it hasn't been dealt with, but you still feel connected to that person, whether it's, through offense or you're forgiving them repeatedly and you don't know why, it could be because there's a connection there, a spiritual connection, or even a psychological connection that needs to be broken. And for me, part of doing that is breaking soul ties. When I made certain life choices, there were friendships, groups that I had to break away from that were very hard to, because I was used to them. There was comfort there, but I had to pray about God breaking those soul ties and releasing me to be who He wanted me to be, so I can walk away from those friendships.
That's a really valuable point. So this has an application not just to the area of romantic relationships, but all relationships. And I would say, as an example of something I learned in the last couple of years, is I was friends and working with somebody, and it at times felt like hard work, but I persisted. The person had helped me out enormously at a time where I needed support. So I felt a lot of loyalty, and I felt that I should keep working with this person and being friends with this person. But everything we did, nothing seemed to work and nothing seemed to move forwards. And it's not until that friendship essentially broke down and the person was no longer in my life, certainly not on an active day-to-day basis, that there was a massive change. And suddenly I'm meeting new people, I'm getting new opportunities, everything is flowing again. But while that person was in my life, it's almost as if nothing was really working. And it's quite crazy to think that it was just that. There was something about that relationship that was holding things back. So definitely be discerning. Keep that journal. If you're a Christian, pray into your friendships and ask God to show you who you should keep in your life, who you should keep in your life and cultivate that good relationship with. And are there people that need to be removed? And also, if people remove themselves, rather than allow yourself to sort of fall into despair and rejection and feel terrible about it, maybe also ask, is this happening for a reason? And it might be for a good reason. This might not be a bad thing. This might be a blessing.
Definitely. And always do it with a heart of forgiveness, guys. You might not know what's going on with that person. Release them, with a forgiving heart. Who knows, maybe when they're in a better place, the friendship can reform again in a healthy way.
Yeah. With the person that I had that experience with, I was honest and said they need a level of support that I'm not able to give. They need a level of support from somebody that I just simply am not resourced or able to give to one person alone. And sometimes it's just a case of nothing necessarily wrong with either as an individual, just not a good combination. Not a combination of people and personalities that's going to long-term work well together and help each other thrive. So it's not necessarily a reflection on anybody personally. It's just it's almost like a chemistry thing, isn't it, in some ways? Well, thank you so much for coming on the show, Candy. I would love to have you back one day.
I'd love to be back one day. Thank you. It's been fun. It's gone really quickly.
Oh, I'm glad. And are we going to get any more videos from you for Libertatem?
So I am working on some morning devotional videos with TBN UK. They should be on hopefully early next year. I haven't recorded them just yet, but I hope to soon. I haven't scheduled any more Libertatem videos just yet because I'm moving into podcasting. It just gives me a little bit more flexibility in regards to what I can cover, and they're a little bit more interactive if people want to ask questions. But yeah, stay connected. Connect with me on Instagram at Candy Ellie's World to find out, when these things are coming up and being put out.
Lovely. So everybody make sure you follow Candy Ellie Graham and keep up to date, and can't wait to see you on TBN UK. We'll actually get you on TV then. Amazing.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
Welcome to the Step Forward Awards.
It's back. The Dove Meets Stella Awards for the second year running. The UK's definitive Christian and Gospel Music Awards. The 2022 Step Forward Awards. A night fueled with the best in the Christian and Gospel industry. Not to be missed.
And the winner is...
And the winner is...
And the winner is... And the winner is...
Join us for the second annual Step Forward Awards, 7 p.m. on the 26th of November 2022. Held at the Gorman State Theatre, Kilburn, London. Get your tickets at stepforwardawards.com. That's stepfwdawards.com. Look forward to seeing you there.
So what did you think, guys? That was Candy Ellie. You can follow her at Candy Ellie's World, and she shared some of her insight and understanding of relationships, healing, forgiveness, all those good things. And it was just wonderful to have her interview on today. Now, I'm busy preparing future episodes of the variety show. I would love some feedback. Has today's topic... how do you feel about it? Has it made you think? Has it made you react in some way? Do you have any further questions for me? Do you want to challenge me on something? Please do give me some feedback. You can either leave feedback on Feferity Radio. You can go onto the YouTube channel and you can always put something in the comment sections. Or you can even contact me through my social media. If you have a look at Twitter, I'm under Sam Radfo, and same on Instagram, it's Sam Radfo. So please feel free to reach out to me. If you have any feedback and ideas on topics you'd like me to cover in the future, or you've got any tips on interesting guests that perhaps I could invite on the show, do let me know. Next week, we're going to be looking at teen issues. So we'll have a teen coach interview who works with young people. So we'll be looking at some challenges that young people especially face. So that's something to look out for next week. And I'm just going to play another song that is just very appropriate given the topic we've been talking about today, which is how do we connect with other people? What is really positive about those deep connections? What is potentially negative, harmful, and the pitfalls? How to protect ourselves, how to look after ourselves, and how to look after others. And understanding how we form a limbic bond or a soul tie with another person, be it a friend, family member, or a lover, is very important as part of that understanding how complex our interactions are with other people. However, I would like to just leave it on a really positive note, which is that, guys, whatever has gone on, there is always healing. There is always future and hope that things are going to improve. And a lot of it is down to what we choose to do.
But I'm stronger. You thought that I'd be broke happiness. I'm better than that. I'm not gonna blast you on the